The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Friday, the 20th of February, 2026. We're live here at CHD TV. We have a great show for you today. In just a second, I'm bringing on Mack Rosenberg, our General Counsel for Children's Health Defense. Then we're going to go to Dr. Meryl Nass with a very important update on the Farmers Bill and a call for action. So please stay tuned for that. And then we're going to go to Bob Schwartz and Sara Rogers, and we're going to be talking about National Adverse Drug Event Awareness Day. Very important conversation coming up, especially for your children. Right, so let's start. Good morning, Mack Rosenberg. How are you?
I am well, Polly. How are you?
I am good. So what we wanted to know about is the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and what Children's Health Defense are doing and the update since you've done that.
Sure. So as many viewers probably know, last month we filed a lawsuit against the American Academy of Pediatrics on behalf of CHD, 3 families who have been impacted by serious vaccine adverse events. We have 2 families who have lost a total of 3 children and a young lady who was very severely injured. And we filed that lawsuit under a federal law called RICO, and it's about racketeering. And that complaint, in dozens of pages in real detail with links to all the information, explains how the AAP has engaged in a pattern and practice of fraud over many decades that has really negatively impacted children's health in this country, and it's really impacted informed consent and the ability of families to know whether vaccines are safe, because AAP's standard line is that vaccines are safe and effective and that they've been tested and it's been proven that they're safe and effective. And that simply isn't true. So we have that lawsuit that's pending now in the district court, the federal district court in the District of Columbia. Meanwhile, the AAP sued the Department of Health and Human Services in a federal district court in Boston. And they are alleging that they're damaged by, among other things, and the big issue that was before the court last week and is under consideration now, by the decision in January, beginning of January, to change the schedule, change many of the vaccines to shared clinical decision-making, and to reduce the schedule so it's more in line with our peer high-resource countries like Denmark, where children are not given as many vaccines, as many doses of vaccines. HHS was responding to that lawsuit and that motion to try to roll back the schedule to pre-January 2026, based on whether or not they had the authority to do what they were doing. They weren't talking about safety. So we moved, following that hearing, when we heard what happened in the courtroom on February 13th, as the judge is deciding whether or not to enjoin, and that means to stop in this case, the schedule, the January 5th schedule, from going forward and being implemented, and also to whether to stop an ACIP meeting that was scheduled for next week. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So he heard argument from both sides. We listened to it. And the decision was made that we were going to try to intervene in that case because they were not, neither side was addressing a real core issue here, which is the safety of the pre-January schedule. This is a schedule, the result of which was that one family lost twins, 2 babies, and another family lost 1 baby, and a girl was seriously injured. That schedule has never been proven safe, and neither side was bringing that up in the lawsuit. It was sort of a dry administrative proceeding, and the doctors were also arguing that if they were forced to do this, so AAP had declarations from doctors, if they were forced to go with this new schedule, parents were going to have questions, and they were going to have to take time to answer those parents' questions, and they would be able to see fewer patients, and they would lose money as a result. So it was really a dollars and cents. And I think, it's something many of us have understood who are very involved in the health freedom movement, but I think that sort of lifted a veil for a lot of people to see the money aspect of this for pediatricians. And American Academy of Pediatrics is really a trade association for those pediatricians. So we've asked the court to let us intervene in that case. And so the court is now considering our motion along with the other issues that it heard on February 13th.
Kim, so just to be clear for our viewers and for anyone who wants to clip this out the wrong way, yes, you were saying that you would like the childhood vaccine schedule to be more in line with our peers like Denmark. We at Children's Health Defence are not saying, oh, vaccines are safe and effective if they're just less. It's step by step to try and get what we want to achieve. We're not advocating for vaccines that they are safe and effective.
No, that's right. No, so the issue before the court was which schedule, was going to remain in place. It's not that we are saying, oh, good on you, we're done, we've got the Denmark schedule. That's not it at all. So this is a work in progress. And one of the things we argue in our RICO lawsuit is that AAP and others have been told for decades that we need to test that schedule as a whole, and it's never been done. And we know that there are serious, serious problems with respect to individual vaccine safety testing too, without a doubt. So this does not, even if that January 5th schedule goes forward, this does not solve all our problems, but it vastly changes the landscape for families.
Yeah, and one more point just before we move on to ACIP is that when you talk about the beautiful Shaw twins and the other baby that died, we are also acknowledging babies that have died around the world following the vaccine schedule. So many of you have done your stories to Children's Health Defence. So this is for you all, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this, we have certain plaintiffs who are named in this case, but we acknowledge, as you said, Polly, that there have been many, many children who have died or been seriously injured following vaccination.
And so let's get on to ACIP. So just talk a little bit more about that. So shock horror yesterday, breaking news, it's postponed, and all kinds of rumors and shenanigans going on, and everyone's getting upset and gosh knows what. So put us right on. Well, first of all, why don't you just remind people what ACIP is?
So sure, ACIP is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and it's under the CDC. And they basically create the advisory schedule. It's not a mandate. ACIP doesn't mandate, but they create an advisory schedule, and many states historically have relied on that schedule in developing their own state schedules and the state mandates that we talk about frequently on here and the impact of those state mandates. ACIP meets several times a year, and what they're supposed to do according to federal law is give notice of the meeting, give a publicly available agenda of the meeting with time for people to be able to review that agenda, try to get on the speakers list, participate in the meeting in some way. There was, to my knowledge, no notice sent out about next week's meeting, and I have no personal knowledge of why that did or didn't happen. Last night, yesterday, HHS filed a brief document. It's a one-paragraph document with the court, letting them know that the ACIP meeting for next week had been postponed, but will be rescheduled. So they have to follow their notice requirements. So it's not that the meeting is wiped off the schedule. It's not that ACIP has been dissolved. None of those things have happened. This is just a postponement of the meeting.
Okay, so everybody can just chill out and calm down. It's all going to be okay. So Kim, how can people get involved in the AAP lawsuit with Children's Health Defence? Because I know there's lots of people that do want to. It's a bit like, when you make a film, there's producers and stuff like that. So they could donate and say that they were part of whatever the outcome is going to be for AAP, which I hope is really big.
So, we're really excited about this lawsuit, and we would very much appreciate if people wanted to show their support through donations to CHD. And we're always interested in hearing from people. I am happy to receive emails and messages from people who are following along with that lawsuit. It is sort of exciting and groundbreaking, and we liken it and this is the RICO lawsuit, we liken it to the tobacco litigation of a couple of decades ago. And it really does follow that same trajectory, except worse in many respects. One, not everyone smoked, but most people are exposed to this vaccine schedule. Also, the pharmaceutical companies are either purchasing, acquiring other drug companies or drug products to treat what essentially are vaccine injuries, right? We see autoimmune disease and all kinds of other issues, or they're developing drugs themselves to treat that. At least the big tobacco companies were not opening oncology clinics to treat people who got cancer from smoking. But here, it's creating that customer for life. So if a person has an adverse reaction and develops an autoimmune condition, and then they need medication for that, well, now Big Pharma has a medication for that. And if you have a side effect from that, they may have medication for the side effect. So it really is following this customer for life trajectory.
And just to say to if you do want to donate towards our AAP, you can go into the donate thing and specifically earmark it for the legal department, just if people
Yes.
get involved, which is great. Kim Mack Rosenberg, thank you for coming on and updating us. We really appreciate this, and we're very excited about all that you're doing there in CHD Legal. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone, now we're going to go to Dr. Meryl Nass. This is very exciting. Good morning, Dr. Nass.
Good to see you, Polly.
Well, so I think if it's okay with you, can you just remind our viewers what the Farmers Bill is about and why it's so important?
Thanks. So the Farm Bill is a bill that Congress passes usually every 5 years to spend a tremendous amount of money, about 160 to $200 billion a year on farm subsidies and on food stamps and many other things. This time it's been delayed for 2.5 years. And so what happens is the chairman of a committee, the Agriculture Committee in the House or in the Senate, rolls out a proposed bill. He has a bill that he would like to see passed, and he rolls it out only a few days before there is a markup, which means the committee members get to argue about what should and shouldn't be in the bill. They can amend it, they can remove sections. And so Glenn Thompson, the chairman, rolled out a bill Friday, a week ago, which is going to go to markup on Monday. This is about a roughly 800-page bill with lots of things in it, and it's a surprise until he shows us what is in the bill. And there is much that we are extremely unhappy about, and I will tell you about as much as I can. People are still picking through it and trying to figure out what all the legal language means. Okay, so this is page 1 of the bill, and that's what it looks like. It's called the Farm Food and National Security Act of 2026, but everybody knows it as the Farm Bill. Now, one section in the Farm Bill always deals with pesticides, and what we are contending with is an effort by Monsanto, which was bought by Bayer, so now it has both names, to try to give liability shields to all pesticides in the United States, similar to the liability shield for vaccines. That means people who are injured can't sue the companies. And they've tried a variety of different ways to do this. And in the Farm Bill, the method they're using is to say that no state, no city, no court can take a view about a pesticide that its dangers are any different than what the EPA label says. So the EPA registers pesticides and agrees with a label that is usually crafted by the manufacturer. And pesticides encompasses something like almost 20,000 different products in the United States that kill rodents, viruses, bugs, all sorts of things. They're all designed to kill some sort of product. It also includes herbicides. Well, Monsanto is in a bind because when Bayer bought it, it had litigation pending, and shortly after Bayer bought Monsanto for $63 billion back in 2018, the first case was won by a claimant showing that Monsanto knew that its product, glyphosate, caused non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And subsequent to that, it's hard to believe, 200,000 cases have been filed against Monsanto, and roughly half of them have been settled already for roughly $10–11 billion, but half are still out there. Monsanto does not want to pay, wants to keep using glyphosate. Glyphosate, of course, is the companion product for GMO seeds that are Roundup ready, glyphosate ready, which means glyphosate is a herbicide. It kills all the crops and the weeds and initially killed everything else except for crops that had a GMO gene that would make them resistant to Roundup. So this came on the market 30, 40 years ago, and farmers started using it, and it saved them a lot of money because they didn't have to weed anymore. They were done with weeding. They just had to spray glyphosate, and the only product that grew was the one they wanted. But then it turned out the stuff is harmful both to farmers and to the eaters of the products. And so Monsanto has been denying that ever since because it gave them quite a monopoly in agricultural industries and helped make them very rich. Okay, so what has it done to try to get this liability shield? Remember, vaccines are the only consumer product with a liability shield in the United States. There's no reason why pesticides need it. Pesticides aren't going to stop being made if they don't get a liability shield. But Monsanto has spent billions of dollars to lobby to create a lobbying organization called the Modern Agriculture Alliance of hundreds of pesticide companies. And they've also managed over the many years to take control of the pesticide regulators in the EPA. And there's a little bit of pesticide regulation at USDA and just a tiny bit at FDA. So what has happened is that EPA has approved labels that do not clearly show the warnings that should be there about how various pesticide products may cause cancer, neurologic injuries, reproductive harms, etc. And because of the arcane practices at EPA is able to delay updating labels for decades at a time. So the label we're currently using on glyphosate is about 30 years old. And so when new information comes out that a product is harmful, if it doesn't go on the label for 10 or 30 years, you can't sue because it didn't go on the label because it's that old label or that original label or the current label that EPA approved that is the one this farm bill is telling you courts must go by. They cannot take in any other information about the harms of a pesticide product unless it's on the label. So that's the problem here. This is not the only thing Monsanto has done. They have also gone to the Supreme Court and asked it to overturn one of the cases where someone got non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And as if that's not bad enough, the Trump administration on December 1 asked the Supreme Court to take the case, which it has, and to rule in favor of Monsanto Bayer and against the injured non-Hodgkin's lymphoma patient. Furthermore, what just happened 2 days ago, actually a day and a half ago, is that President Trump issued an executive order stating that glyphosate, Monsanto's product, and phosphorus are now necessary products for the defense industry. So he invoked the Defense Production Act from 1950 and gave special privileges to the manufacturers of phosphorus and glyphosate. Now, in the United States, who are those manufacturers? Monsanto Bayer and a company called Israel Chemicals Limited, ICL. And both of them are in St. Louis, Missouri, and they work together. And by the way, phosphorus is used for the defense industry as white phosphorus, which is similar to napalm, although it has other uses. So the president has basically used all the authority he can possibly garner to support Monsanto against plaintiffs in this. That's terrible. But it gets worse than that. So other parts of the Farm Bill expand the ability to regulate pesticides to the USDA taking away some of the control from EPA, but also give the EPA administrator the ability to exempt pesticides. He can just decide, it seems, to exempt pesticides from the law called FIFRA that regulates pesticides. He can just say that it doesn't apply. And in particular, the Farm Bill is trying to give this exemption to seeds that have been GMO'd to resist pesticides. So just like the Roundup Ready seeds, there are other seeds that Monsanto is developing and other companies have developed to make their seed products for corn, for cotton, for canola, for other things, resistant to other pesticides. And what the Farm Bill seems to ask is that any product, any seed that allows for BT, corn seed, there is a seed that makes its own pesticide, and that pesticide is called Bacillus thuringiensis toxin. It used to be purchased and farmers would sprinkle it on their crops. Now they get a seed and the actual crop makes its own pesticide. This pesticide is toxic for many humans, and it's in the corn at very high levels. Crops that produce their own pesticides can be exempted entirely from the law that regulates pesticides. In other words, higher and higher levels could be found in our food without regulation. That's dangerous, very dangerous.
I mean, it's extremely disturbing, everything that you're talking about. How can people get involved to stop? We have to stop this. I mean, what happens if we do nothing? It's just, we're going to kill ourselves with this, right?
Yes, exactly. This is part of the great poisoning that Catherine Austin Fitts has told us about. So, so the entire part of the entire pesticide section in the Farm Bill should be removed. But if you want to be specific, the part that gives the liability shield is sections 102.05 through 102.11. You'll see 3 of my Substacks that list who is be able to go to this Substack, which has a list of everybody on the Agriculture Committee, and their phone number. So you can call every one of them and tell them you don't want this, that you want to get rid of really the entire pesticide section of the Farm Bill. And then there's something else, which is another section of the Farm Bill, which is called 12006, which is trying to get rid of a law that California passed, which said that animals raised as livestock should be allowed to at least have enough room to move around. In some cases, they are kept in crates where they cannot move their arms and legs. They're just stuck in a crate. I'd like you to show asset 2, please. So the California Farm Bill specifies a certain amount of square feet that animals have to be able to be given as they're being raised, so they can actually move like real animals. This is called Proposition 12 in California. And in the Farm Bill, they want to get rid of Proposition 12. They don't want any state to be able to make a law like this that would sort of challenge the authority of the USDA to say what are the necessary requirements for raising animals. So we want to get rid of 12006, which would stop allowing animals to have enough room to walk around. And the issues are very broad in this case. There is preemption. Preemption means the federal rules will stop state rules from having authority. It basically neuters the states as being able to make laws for anything. Now, the Constitution says that the federal government is not supposed to have the authority to make laws that are different from that the Constitution says the federal government can only make laws for specific items that the Constitution gives it. and everything else goes to the states or the people. And the states make the laws, or the people decide. And what's been happening is, over time, the federal government has usurped more and more authority, which the Constitution doesn't give it, to make laws about things that were supposed to be state authorities. And so preemption the term means the federal government is trying to take over authority from the states. And so that's happening with this in many ways, because the states also have been trying to make their own laws about pesticides and other things. And in many cases they have, and they're more restrictive than the EPA label. And so this farm bill will neuter the ability of states to make laws that are stricter than what the EPA has on its label. If I can go, Lou, if you can go to my Asset 2 and give people the URLs for the 3 Substacks that will tell them what to do and where to find the Ag Committee members, I'd appreciate it. And
Well, okay, let's Lou do that, and he'll certainly put them in the show notes as well for everybody. So we'll
okay.
see them. Dr.
And
Nass,
one more thing, Asset 1 talks about the executive order that Trump issued 2 days ago. And lawyers are still trying to discuss what that is. And but it may supersede by saying that it confers all immunity for domestic production of glyphosate. If we could have that up again, all immunity may be very, very broad. Because the act it refers to states that no person shall be held liable for any act resulting from compliance with the executive order. So Trump may be trying to basically do an end run around everybody and say, you can't sue glyphosate for anything. Anyway, this is a problem. What I hope everybody watching will do is to make the calls, call the members of the Ag Committee and say, this is not tolerable. We will give you their phone numbers, their names. We'll tell you which are the most important to call, and let's try and stop these terrible things in the Farm Bill from being passed at the markup and then being passed by the full Congress. Thank you very much.
Dr. Nass, thank you so much for coming on and educating us this morning. And I know our viewers will definitely jump in and get involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, let's go now to Bob Schwartz and Sara Rogers. Good morning, both of you. Oh, I don't think we can hear you, Bob.
Good morning, Polly.
Good morning.
Good morning, both of you. Well, this is important. National Adverse Drug Event Awareness Day. Actually, before we get onto that, both of you just quickly tell everyone who you are. Just remind everyone who you are, because I know they certainly know who Bob is.
Sure. My name's Sara Rogers. I'm co-founder and president at the American Society of Pharmacovigilance. We're a nonprofit focused on addressing the high rate of adverse drug events in the U.S., and we established National Adverse Drug Event Awareness Day in 2021. So we'll be celebrating really observing the 5th annual this year. So we're excited to be on to talk about that.
Yeah, thank you as well. And Bob, quickly remind people who you are.
Yes, I'm the executive director of A Better Bob, doing business as risk.org. And I am here to tell a story about an adverse event that I had 22 years ago that gave me cognitive impairment, neurological damage. And I did a documentary film, which is proudly watched. You can watch on CHD TV, If I Had Known the Risk. And it brings awareness, caution, and accountability to the psychotropic drug industry.
Right, and now tell us about the concerns that you have. We were talking before we came on, just to tell our viewers, and the conversation about, young children. I just want to get straight to that, if you don't mind, because I know our viewers are very interested. Young children as young as 5 on ADHD drugs or whatever. And we've heard of even younger children being given antipsychotics and all kinds of crazy stuff. Talk to us about the real problem that we've got in America, probably around the world, but let's start with America right now, with psychotropic drugs.
Got you. Sara, I'll be the first to talk about this. In the research that we've done at A Better Bob, the abuse is almost similar to the opioid crisis that we had for many years ago, but it's almost similar, and it's almost 4 times as large. And basically, these drugs are stimulants that are given to the children, and it's really on the same family as meth and cocaine. And it's given to 6, 9, 12-year-olds, and it's a crisis that we really need to do better informed consent, better transparency, and give better options, diet, exercise, sleep to the child, because to give anyone these kind of drugs with really no scientific evidence behind it, it's a disorder, it's not a disease, you're really setting this child up for future polypharmacy, which we're seeing a lot of tragic events out there happening out there in the country today. Many examples of children that are prolonged onto these drugs and move on to other drugs, and it's just it's a national crisis that we're facing today, Polly, and we hope to bring again awareness, caution, and accountability, not only on the MAHA side of the house, but we're really trying to educate people on the MAGA side of the house too.
Yeah, Sarah, why is this so under-recognized in the US? I don't understand why this is not one of our top priorities.
Yeah, and I think what really is surprising to me is kind of the scope and the magnitude. We have data from 10 years ago showing that we spend $528 billion a year on non-optimized medication management. A lot of it is some of the issues that Bob was bringing up. Underreporting, I think, is a big deal. And one of our priorities this year is how can we update and modernize the national infrastructure for adverse drug event reporting and identifying these events in the first place. So tying a symptom back to the medication often is missed in the clinic. I think our clinicians aren't always trained to think about the drug as a potential cause of some of these symptoms that we see pop up. And, even though it is significantly underreported, it's already on the FDA website stating that this is the 4th leading cause of death. So I think to some extent, even though it's underreported, we're just the piece that we know is still really significant. So if we update the infrastructure and we have an even better view of what's really going on, it can help us to work towards more solutions and coordinate efforts, because there are, as Bob mentioned, a lot of really good efforts. We need more informed consent and things like that.
When I speak to people that are on psychotropic drugs, they're just like, well, I have to have them, otherwise I'm just not going to be able to cope, or I have to have them or I'm going to die, and the list goes on and on. But these people have no idea the side effects of these medications. And dare we even talk about the school shootings, because I'm sorry if people out there are not quite understanding this, but they are all on psychotropic medicine, or if not, they are in intermediate. Nothing more dangerous than being on psychotropic medicine and then just taking yourself off just because you feel like it, and then maybe I'll go back on it, or maybe I'll take it. We've seen that in the film Who Killed Alex Bordalakis. We have seen the dangers of this stuff. Could either of you talk more, or disagree with me, please?
Oh no, I'll jump in there, Polly, because it goes back to my example. I took a lethal dose of, I was prescribed a lethal dose of a drug called Concerta that I only took for 5 days. And I never had any kind of psychological problems before that. And after that 5 days, I suffered an acute psychosis. And what it led me to have is thought disorder, faulty thinking, and led me to cognitive impairment, which I've been battling for over 20 years now. And it took that many years to uncover what exactly happened to me, again, on only 5 days of medication. And I think it's very important that we establish March 24th as the adverse event day, because 22 years ago, that was the exact day that it happened to me again. And it's just a situation where we need to really get people to to report these events, so we can make the industry even safer, so nobody has to go through these unspeakable hardships going forward.
Yeah. So, Sarah, what do you want to see policymakers, healthcare providers, what do you want to see done there?
So I think what we see is a lot of individuals and organizations working on different elements of this broader problem of adverse drug events. So this year, what we're really pushing for is a modernization of the National Action Plan for Adverse Drug Event Prevention. That was a document that was initially developed by the Department of Health and Human Services and put out in 2014. There is some really good information. I think a lot of work went into developing that plan, but there's been so many changes to the landscape and the challenges that we face that we have new tools available. We have different types of genetic testing that we can do in the clinic to see how people process medications differently. There's new opportunities with data and AI to maybe prevent and predict adverse events. So, and we can almost pull together some of these different solutions that people are working towards, like informed consent, like deprescribing, and push that under a kind of a national action plan that we can coordinate across agencies and organizations.
And what about the people? How can the people get involved in this day?
So we do have a website, campaign website, thirdcause.org, and just named after the adverse drug events being the third leading cause of death in the country. We initially launched the campaign as fourth cause based on some of the older data from FDA, but when you look at medication errors and that type of thing, it's really, it's the third leading cause. And so you can download the social media toolkit. If you have a story or experience, you can submit that through the website. We're also organizing a policy roundtable in DC on March 24th that will be live streamed, so you can register to attend that virtually at thirdcause.eventbrite.org.
And Bob, what would you like to see happen on that day? What would be your greatest outcome?
Yeah, awareness where people can go and report these the side effects, so decision makers can go back and take this information and again make the industry safer. It's almost kind of like when automobiles decide to put seatbelts in cars. You have to get to a point where we have to do better at educating the country as far as what adverse events go. So if you go back and look at some of those numbers, Polly, that 4.6% of hospitals, doctors, and patients only report adverse events. And if you look at the numbers that Sara was talking about, this was back in 2016, it was costing the country $528 billion. I wouldn't be surprised with the remainder amount of people or the unreported events. This might be the leading cause of death in America today.
Okay, I have a quick question for you. I don't know whether either of you can answer this. So if I'm a young mum and I've got my 5-year-old and I'm going to take him into the doctor for his whatever, vaccines, everything, and the doctor says, well, you know what, I've got to cut some psychotropic drugs, give him this, to sleep, to wake up, to whatever, work, live. Are they getting paid or incentives for those drugs? Like with the vaccines, that's for sure getting incentives and money incentives. Is the same thing happening with the drugs? Because I used to know someone that was a drug pusher. She'd go and take doctors out for lunch in a flashy car and give them gifts and stuff and sell them pills. And she had no idea what she was selling, but she just did it. So the whole thing is corrupt to me is what I'm trying to get. I want that young mum to know that that doctor doesn't necessarily have your 5-year-old's best interest at heart. Sarah?
Yeah.
You want to? I can say yes to that question because is the doctor getting incentive to write a prescription for a drug? Yes, because they don't make any money by telling the patient that, hey, why don't you try diet, exercise, and sleep before we decide to go down a dangerous, a very dangerous path like this when you're talking about ADHD medication or SSRIs.
Sarah, yeah.
No, I do think there's a misalignment of incentives across healthcare and how, services are reimbursed. But in the end, we're all users of healthcare. And if somebody gives us the wrong information or information that's not the best for us, we have to advocate for ourselves by, asking questions, doing our own kind of research. Why is this medication needed? What is this going to do? How do I get off of this medication? How do I know if it's working? What should I monitor for? These are, we have to kind of empower ourselves to really be advocates for our own health, because it's somebody's opinion. It may be right. It may not be right.
All right, and just to finish this segment off, before we go to Brian Hooker, I'm going to say something, and neither of you have to reply to even answer this. This is not their views. It's not necessarily Children's Health Defense News. But here's the thing I have. I bet you that the unvaccinated kids that are born at home with no vitamin K, all of that, breastfed babies are not on medication. I'm just saying there's a pattern here. Okay, and that's coming from Polly Tommy, nobody else. But I bet you any money. So be careful right from the beginning. Don't vaccinate. Your kids will not need drugs. That is what I'm sure will happen. All right, Sarah's staying very quiet here. All right, thank you, Sarah Rogers. Thank you, Bob Schwartz. We really appreciate you coming on, and we do hope you come back on again. This is a subject we need to cover way more than we've been covering. So please do contact us if you've got any information or anything that can help educate our young parents out there on the dangers of these psychotropic drugs.
Thank you, Polly, for having us and CHD.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, both of you. All right, everyone, now we're going to go to Brian Hooker, the myth of incurable pain. So enjoy his roundtable.
Well, good morning, CHD TV. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Hooker. This is my favorite show, Doctors and Scientists, and I get to interview one of my favorite guests who it's been like so long since we had him on before. It's high time that we brought him back direct from north of Phoenix, Arizona. Dr. Stephen LaTulippe, welcome back to the show. We talked about central pain before, and we talked about your marvelous success in dealing with central pain. Break down central pain for us again. Just give us our review.
Okay, so to describe central pain in the simplest of forms, and it's overly simplified, I would call it emotional pain gone bad. To define it a little bit more strictly, it is a pain that actually derives from some past emotional traumatic event that your brain then processes. And because of that processing, which I believe is through a reactive astrocytosis, it's a pain that actually generates pain in the limbic region or the emotional center of the brain. And through that processing of that central pain, what I call central pain, it becomes, as it's processed, it becomes kind of like a reverse production of brain inflammation, where the original pain is the brain inflammation as opposed to a peripheral injury. It's an emotional injury that is processed, and it actually changes the function and the structure of the brain. And if you're familiar with the classic four-step pain pathway that all medical doctors are taught in medical school, if you just turn that on its head, the four steps are transduction, conduction, modulation, and perception. So turn that on its head. And if someone experiences severe emotional trauma, like say they're raped or their parents are killed, they see a friend suffering severe traumatic injury, maybe the parents divorced at a critical time, then they suffer this terrible emotional pain. And as a result of that, it actually originates a pain that is then processed and then transported or conducted after it's modulated from a painful emotion into an actual physical pain, and then it is conducted elsewhere. And that's when you get hypersensitization somewhere in the periphery. And it could be in the central nervous system as well. Like I discovered that there was a cascade, central pain cascade. Usually when a young woman is traumatized in some way, she'll develop migraines. And so that's in the brain itself. But then if the trauma continues or if it remains unresolved, and so it's emotionally traumatic over a period of time, then there's a tendency, and it's not universal, but a tendency proceed to irritable bowel syndrome. So it's enteric in the visceral
Right.
neurons and so forth. And then likewise, it then proceeds to fibromyalgia, which is a peripheral somatic pain that is so prevalent. We see it so much today. So it's a very real pain. And that's the thing that people have to understand. These are not people who are faking it. Their
Right.
pain is every bit as real as anybody, like somebody that hit their thumb with a hammer.
Exactly. And now I want to talk about your book, Pain Free and Living Again: How to Heal Fibromyalgia, IBS, Migraines, and Other Mystery Pain Syndromes. I'm so excited about this. To break down, the book for us, and also, something that might be helpful. Should we also be referencing any of your previous writings in terms of like picking up this book and understanding central pain, and then how you've helped heal it?
Okay, well, first of all, I tried in the course of my medical years of practice, I tried to actually publish this. I was very involved with pain medicine as
Right.
well as addiction medicine. But I continued to hit a brick wall when I said I wanted to publish a new idea that nobody
Mhm.
seems to understand. And, as I looked up all these syndromes that I classify as central pain syndromes in that family, I looked them up on the internet and I found out that universally, everywhere, they call these pains incurable, these syndromes
Right.
like fibromyalgia and all. And I just couldn't accept that. I said, we're missing something. And I was determined to figure it out because my patients were suffering so bad. And so I tried to actually publish this years ago in, I think it was Practical Pain Management.
Mhm.
And the editor in chief loved how I treated the central pain patients. But he said, I I can't publish your theory of the mechanism of central pain because it's a new idea, it doesn't fit the narrative. And he admitted in an email, says, frankly, I know nothing about it. So I
Oh,
really
wow.
don't feel comfortable publishing that. So I said, okay, well, I was so busy in my practice, I really didn't have time to pursue it. But I tried and tried to get published, tried to get even case studies published, which would just explode the narrative, showing that, what's really happening here. So I decided finally, in fact, I spoke with you earlier. I spoke with several other medical researchers, PhDs, and they all told me the same thing. They said, uh, the mutiny of medicine includes medical research. And they said, if you don't toe the party line and if you're not touting, the current narrative, you're not going to get anywhere. They will not let you do it. So I was very frustrated. We have no symposium that I could go to say, hey, I
Right.
think I'm onto something here. Well, so they say it's incurable. And I say that's a bunch of bunk. They have to be wrong because
Mhm.
I healed, and they don't want me to use the word cured. But cure is a four-letter word
Right.
in the mutiny of medicine. So
Right.
you cure a patient and you lose a patient, and that's not good for making money for the business side of medicine. So I just decided, I got this figured out. I tested my theories in the practical setting of the clinic. It worked beautifully, and I can affirm and claim beyond any doubt I have fully healed central pain patients in my practice, and I'm estimating at least 1 to 2,000 patients over a period of about 20 years. And when I say heal, I mean that they have no more pain, they are on no medications whatsoever, and they never experience a relapse. So I would call that healing. And so I have to say, I got to get this word out. I've got to debunk this somehow. The only avenue that was available to me was to self-publish, and so I did.
Well, I'm so thankful that you did. I mean, and shame on anybody that passed this opportunity, because there are so many people that are living in that, that painful bondage of chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, pain associated with PTSD. One of the things that has happened in my household is we have a 28-year-old now that has been able to communicate through spellers for 2 years. One of the things that we're finding is that his inability to communicate for 26 years and being underestimated led to a lot of emotional pain. And one of the things in the back of my mind, Steve, is that some of the chronic pain symptoms that he's associated, that we associated with his condition, having autism, a lot of that has to be birthed out of the emotional trauma of being locked in his body for such a long period of time. I like to personalize things because I think so many people are, on a personal level, they're looking at these trauma and they're looking for answers. So tell us about how you've unlocked these patients. I mean, start with whatever condition you want to start with, but let's talk about unlocking them.
Okay, so the first thing you have to do, and as I said, I practiced broad spectrum pain management.
Right.
I mean, when you talk about an interventionalist, somebody that we call them the needle jockeys, they just do injections and so forth. This is not really pain management, but you have to, first of all, identify a pain as being either central or peripheral in origin, and so you got to have a differential diagnosis. You want to make sure, is this really central pain? Is it generated from, as you were talking about, an emotional pain that went bad? Secondly, the very important thing after that is to establish a therapeutic alliance. And that is because, you have to win these patients over. You have to win their confidence because they have been told they have an incurable condition. And then they finally are at wit's end. Many of my patients came to me suicidal. They said, I heard about you. I was sent to you. You're it. I'm pulling the trigger if you can't fix me. And I said, well, I'm glad you came to me. And I would tell them this is not incurable pain. And I had to convince them that it was a false narrative that they were told. And so in order to heal central pain, I developed a strategy, and it's basically a 3-step strategy, a recovery plan. Most of these patients have been placed on medications by doctors who are treating something that they have no clue as to what they are really treating. So my 3-step plan is, number one, stop the wrong medications. And that includes 6 categories: ineffective medications, poorly tolerated medications, expensive medications that the patient can't afford, or medications that have limited benefit, or they're contraindicated for one reason or other, or they're just flat out dangerous. And in the case of central pain, since it's pain, a lot of doctors err in treating these patients with opioids, benzodiazepines, and worst of all, carisoprodol. And if you combine those, you're creating a monster, because all of these actually augment central pain. They make it much worse. So you got to stop the wrong medications and then start the right medications to bridge this gap. And all of the medications I start, by the way, Brian, are temporary. They are just temporary. The patients get off all of them. And the treatment, the initial treatment of the right medications is very simple. I base it on a primary central pain symptom triad, which includes anxiety, pain, and insomnia. So if I control these symptoms, then I've got the central pain under control. After that comes step 3 in the recovery plan, which is train the brain, because central pain is a learned pain and it has to be unlearned because of that. And it's a process of rewiring the brain so that these faulty processes that created the centrally originating pain is completely reversed. And that is possible. And through coaching, therapeutic lifestyle changes, simple daily drills, then what you do is you condition the brain to reverse the structural and functional changes that actually were caused by this reactive astrocytosis. It really doesn't take long, and it's doable. It's just a very reversible process. And so healing is a guarantee. I mean, I got to the point where I knew that I could heal these patients and confidently tell them so.
You check so many boxes for me, especially, talking about temporary, medications rather than permanent. You hear, in circles regarding pain management and even, looking at pain management, bridging over into psychiatry. Everybody's like on their maintenance dose. And you're like, okay, so how long do I have to maintain my maintenance dose. And so talking about something like that as temporary, I mean, is super, super encouraging, because medicine long term isn't necessarily good for you. But
That's right.
talk a little bit about that more, and then also I want to break down reactive astrocytosis a little bit too. In terms of that, in terms of the evidences of that too, if you can go there.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, to answer your first question, how do we get patients on the road to healing? Well, the first thing, the healing begins as soon as they lose their fear of the unknown. Like, what is it I got? Some of these patients come to me thinking that they're on their deathbed. They've got some kind of undetermined disease that ultimately is going to kill them, because that's how miserable they feel. So I explain to them, no, that is not so. And when I look at their histories, their intake histories, I see the patterns, and it's very repeatable. And so I say, no, I can say with confidence, you're going to get better. You're going to be off these medications. And I explain to them the rule of threes. And I just made this up as a way that really, in a concrete way, explained to them the recovery process. I said, anything that you're trying to change the brain to recover from, like any addiction, a food addiction, sugar addiction, whatever it may be, there's the rule of threes that seems to apply very well. The first 3 days are what it takes to go into a withdrawal. Let's say if I wanted to quit caffeine or quit drinking alcohol, and I'm not if I was not a troublesome drinker, a problem drinker, I might still crave it. And the craving really starts on day 3 when you have a habit. By 3 weeks, the craving is maximized, and then you start recovering because you get a resetting of the body's receptors for whatever substance it is craving. So by 3 weeks, it peaks out, and then by 3 months, you have achieved a homeostasis where the receptors are down regulated to their baseline. So I tell them, in 3 months, you're going to be over this. And so the real hardcore answer is you can recover from central pain in 3 months. However, psychologically, so many patients, when I put them on the right medications just to bridge that gap, they say, no, get away. I want to keep it. I've never felt so good in years and years. And so I say, okay, you're in control here. I want them to be relaxed and calm. I say, you tell me when you're ready. Let's start by maybe just forgetting to take a medication for one day. And then you'll realize that you don't really need that medication. And then once they do that, then they realize, oh, he's telling me the truth. And I really can get off the medication, and I have no more symptoms. And so we work them off the medications that they might be on. And it might be 2, 3, 4 medications, sometimes just one. But they have to have the confidence to say, oh, I can do it without the medication. And in this, throughout the whole process, I am training their brains, encouraging them to tap into their own brain resources to say, I really can reverse this process. And it's so exciting to see them, because at the end of their treatment, I had so many patients say, I didn't tell you, I wanted to be polite, but I didn't tell you that I thought you were absolutely crazy when you told me I'd be off all the medications and I wouldn't have any pain. And I laughed with them. They laughed, and they said, please, we got to get this message out. So here I am.
As you were talking, I was like, okay, wait, I had to remind myself, you're a medical doctor? Okay, really? I just don't hear these words coming out of MD mouths. This is really super, super significant. And it's really counterintuitive to business. I mean, in terms of, you're not creating patients for life. You're coaching patients through this particular thing. And it sounds like you set them free.
Yes, absolutely. I had patients begging me to somehow testify. They said, look, this is so incredible. I got my life back. How do we spread this? They wanted to testify in whatever way. They wanted to go to medical conferences and so forth, because it worked. And in my book, I have, for example, some of the worst case studies of patients that I actually healed, took them through the process of how, and explained how they did it. And it's just incredible. And we've just got to get the information out, because this will change the entire way we think about pain in general. And specifically, it will give doctors a model to understand central pain, because they have to be able to communicate with the patients. And that's why I wrote my book primarily for the patients, but secondarily for doctors, so they can actually communicate with each other and make this pain go away permanently.
Exactly. Well, let's nerd out on the brain and talk about reactive astrocytosis. What is that? Where is that in the brain? Is it limbic? And also, how does that tie to central pain?
Well, reactive astrocytosis, first of all, there are what's called glial cells, or gliocytes.
Right.
And right now we know that there are 4 types. When I went through medical school, they taught me that the astrocytes were simply supportive cells for the neurons, and that was its only function. Now we know there are 4 types. There's been a 5th type that actually in recent years, has been postulated. But these reactive astrocytes are actually involved in the regulation and homeostasis of the brain, based on the ongoing sensory input that we receive externally from our environment through the 5 senses. And the way I see the limbic system and this reactive astrocytosis, it's a way of accumulating the data from your 5 senses: sight, smell, taste, feeling, and just all the 5 senses. And then it has to make sense of it all. It's got to interpret it. And then, being human, we feel it, and then we develop some emotions based on it. And it might be a real positive thing, like my daughter gets married. Oh my goodness, overwhelming. Or you see, I used to do obstetrics, and when I delivered babies, I was always amazed how these great big strong daddies, seeing their baby born for the first time, were just breaking down in tears like babies. It was a positive emotional response, and those don't cause any trauma. They are actually therapeutic, and the astrocytes actually get involved in regulating those emotions. But when you have an emotion that is negatively traumatic, then the astrocytes start overreacting and processing this. And the critical point is that if you have an emotional form of trauma that cannot be reconciled in the normal way, such as in the normal peripheral healing process of a broken bone or something like that, if you cannot heal it, like say a young woman is being repeatedly raped and sexually abused in her home, she lives in this fear of, oh my goodness, when's it going to happen again? I can't protect myself. They tend not to tell anybody. And so they go from one syndrome to the other, starting with migraines, then IBS, then fibromyalgia, and then they'll go on to female pelvic pain, bladder pain syndrome, just a lot of different things. Vulvar vestibulitis, that is another central pain. And unless they can take these severe emotions and bring them into the forebrain so that they can deal with them, and that does take a lot of courage. I mean, it's a brave person that is willing to deal with their sordid emotional past. They don't want to bring that up, but they have to recover. And that's part of training the brain to resolve their central pain. So reactive astrocytosis is just a process of regulating all the sensory input in the brain. I sometimes almost think of that as like a 6th sense. In other words, just pull all the input you receive to the brain from your external world, process it, and then evaluate it. And that has an influence on our thinking and our behavior. And when it's wrong thinking, it can be very destructive to the brain. And it's very fascinating because you're talking about an emotional pain that actually transforms into a real physical pain, just as real as any other physical pain that you might encounter.
So let's say we were looking at the brain cross section, or we were looking at a part of the architecture, the anatomy, and we were looking at glial cells specifically. Would reactive astrocytosis, would we see damage? Would we see glial scars, or is it just more from a standpoint of just general neuroinflammation, or how does that look?
Well, that's a very fascinating question. In other words, we associate any form of tissue injury with inflammation. And we know that the brain can be inflamed in a lot of different ways. Traumatic brain injury or concussion. You can have infections, viral, bacterial infections can cause encephalitis. We have proven beyond any doubt that autoimmune diseases or organic brain diseases like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis can cause brain inflammation. But we also know that depression and anxiety and even insomnia can cause brain inflammation. Whenever you have inflammation in the body, you know that there is fibrosis associated with that scar tissue. When we see that in the various disorders of the brain, the organic brain disorders I was talking about. But, I don't have an answer to the question of, can you get so much scarring in the limbic brain that you cannot be healed? Well, I found that to not be the case, and I have not investigated that in a research setting, a research capacity. I would love to do that, but I don't know the answer to that. All I can tell you is from a clinical setting, these patients were all fully recovered, and I dealt with the worst of the worst. If you read on the example I have of a patient with complex regional pain syndrome of the knee, this guy was the angriest patient I have ever met in all the years of my medical practice. He was angry. I said, "What's going on? What are you so mad about?" He says, "Nobody can tell me why my knee pain hurts." And he was rubbing his entire knee. "My knee hurts." He had an arthroscopic surgery on the knee, and it was very, very painful post-operatively. He told his orthopedist, and his orthopedist wasn't listening to him. He said, "Oh, that's normal." Well, it wasn't normal. And then all of a sudden his knee started getting red and hot and swollen. He walked into the orthopedist's office and said, "Treat me." Well, lo and behold, he was hospitalized. He had a post-operative knee infection, very serious thing. He had to have IV antibiotics for many weeks. But finally came the time where he recovered, but the pain never went away. It got worse and worse and worse. And if you look into the history of this guy, it was because he never wanted to have surgery in the first place. He was a framer, a carpenter framer, and he loved his work. He never wanted to stop working for the surgery, and he feared not being able to return to work. So, and then when the worst thing happened that he could have possibly imagined did happen, he was emotionally traumatized. And it was that emotional trauma that perpetuated and centralized his pain in his knee. So I said, "Well, I think you came to the right place." I said, I understand why they can't explain to you this pain, but I can. And I did. And to make a long story short, we talked about it. We trained his brain, got him off the wrong medications. He was on a mega dose, 240 milligrams of methadone daily.
Oh my goodness.
Daily. Yeah, to treat his central pain. And of course, opioids don't work. So I got him off of that, made sure he was off of benzodiazepines. He had been on some for anxiety. As it turned out, I did all my psychiatry and my medical practice. He had never been diagnosed with a bipolar disorder. I treated him for that. He recovered. This guy went back to work. He ended up he had severe knee arthritis, and he had a total knee replacement, and completely without incident, he went back to work. He was treated, and his central pain went away forever. This guy was a happy camper. It was really nice to see. And it's very rewarding.
It's so encouraging. Are other practitioners listening to you? Is anybody else doing this? I'm glad you wrote a book to spread the word on this, but it seems so successful, so encouraging, and your case studies support what you're saying. Let's get this out there. Let's get more information out there. How is that going, and how would you like it to go?
Well, I really feared that I was going to go the way of Aristarchus, Copernicus, Galileo. These guys, if you're familiar with heliocentrism, the heliocentric universe, where Aristarchus in 230, 300 BC, he proposed that the Earth actually rotated around the sun, and he was considered a Looney Tune. And it was 2,000 years later, along came the next scientist who proposed that, and that was Copernicus.
Copernicus,
And he was ridiculed and shamed. And then, we even have more recent examples, like in the early 1980s, when I was actually in my PhD in microbiology, they were figuring out that H. pylori caused peptic ulcer disease, was associated with that. Well, they ridiculed him, pulled his funding from him, and so forth. And I thought, nobody's listening to me, except that when I would attend conferences and give lectures on central pain, all the doctors were blown away. They thought, wow, we've never heard this. This really sounds reasonable and rational, and it makes sense. And it worked, obviously. So I was never ridiculed. So I think it won't be hard to get this news out, but I couldn't do it simply because I was not allowed to publish my data. There is just this barrier, and we've got to overcome that. And I don't know how we can do that. We need a symposium for new ideas. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need a symposium for new ideas. Where do they get the book? Where do our viewers get more information on yourself and your practice, Dr.
Sure.
LaTulippe? Let's spread the word and let's get more people aware of your success and what you're doing.
At my website, salatulippe.com, I actually have a video you can access there. Just leave an email. And it's called Exploding the Myth of Incurable Central Pain. You can email me at steve@salatulippe.com. And I'm also an author for AmericaOutloud.news. And and I do a radio show for that network called Unity Without Compromise. My book's on Amazon. It's available, hard copy. Has been available for actually a couple of weeks.
Pain-Free and Living Again. I also want to recommend that people look at Unity Without Compromise, a book that Biblical Basis for Christian Union. Love it. And so I want to give a shameless plug to that as well, if you don't mind.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Well, thank you for joining us, Dr. LaTulippe. I encourage people to reach out, check out your website, check out the book, check out the books on Amazon.com. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this important episode of Doctors and Scientists. Live pain-free. Let's get rid of central pain. Again, my hat's off to Dr. LaTulippe for sharing this. And everybody, have a great Friday.
Okay, we are live. Tell everyone your name, please.
My name is Eileen Dorfmeyer.
And you took 2 Pfizer shots.
Correct.
So what made you take even one?
Besides being stupid, I had just had cancer operation on January 2nd of 2020. So my little brain was pretty messed up. And my husband had been a rock for me when I was going through all this awful stuff. And I know he wanted to travel really, really, really bad when we finally were able to. So he had gotten the shot, and I just kind of felt obligated. So
Did
that's
the
why.
doctors think it was a good idea if you had cancer to take the
Oh
shot?
no, they thought you should have it. It was a push thing, but I wouldn't say pushed. They kind of didn't like you to go down to the doctor's office unless you did have the shot. Let's put it that way.
All right. How did you feel after the first Pfizer shot? How did you feel?
After I had the first shot, the next day I woke up, and it was like I hurt so bad I couldn't eat. My jaw was like super, super, super painful, like really, really, really painful. And I go, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Because I literally didn't eat that day. It hurt so bad. And next day I woke up and the pain was gone and it never came back.
But you still went and had another one.
Yeah. I didn't even think of it being related to, I never even thought of it being related to a COVID shot. I just thought, maybe I slept wrong or something on my jaw. I don't know. I did not relate to it at all.
But who gave you the shots? Was it a pharmacist or was it a doctor?
It was done, they did it at the fairgrounds It's like, I think it's the government thing or something, and they had a big thing at the Fresno Fairgrounds. And it was a mass thing. It was a big mass thing of bringing people in.
Was it a drive-through?
No, we had to get out, and we went into the buildings. Like, there was probably hundreds and hundreds and hundreds over there. They did it for a few days, and you had to have like an appointment to get in. And
did they ask you if you had any reactions to your first Pfizer before
No.
they gave you? They
No,
didn't.
no. No.
All right. What happened after you took the second one?
Second one, it was about 2 days after the second one, approximately. I woke up in the middle of the night, like in screaming pain with my neck.
Your neck?
My neck.
Okay.
And it like hurt really, 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 really bad. It wasn't just a little bit. And it took about a year. I went to the doctor, and he put me with a physical therapist. It was never mentioned about, I again never thought about it until I started hearing people were having problems, and I go, oh my gosh, I bet you that's what happened. Because of the jaw thing first, and then the second thing was that. I mean, I don't know, nobody knows for sure if that's what it was or not, but my physical therapist said, you know, who knows?
Would you take another vaccination?
Oh
or
no, no
another
way in the
shot?
world, no way in the world.
Any vaccinations?
Any vaccinations? I haven't had any years, probably not, no. We're kind of an anti-vaccinate family. None of my grandkids have had them, hardly.
And are they healthy?
Oh yeah.
Your unvaccinated grandchildren?
What?
Are your unvaccinated grandchildren
Well, we
healthy?
had a thing happen in our family with one of our grandkids, Elliot. He was, about 5 tiny, and I guess he had, in order to get into school, this was preschool, he had to have a I don't remember which vaccination, it was one of the usual ones they do. And not wanting to do it, but there was no choice because she did want him to get into that preschool. She had gone there when she was there, and it was a pretty good place. And the next day, he literally turned autistic. And the hospital, not the next day, I'm sorry, 3 days, he turned autistic totally. He had, it wasn't our little boy, we've got another autistic in our family, and we recognized the signs and stuff, and it was like, he was scared, he wouldn't look at anybody but his mother, he cried all the time, he was depressed, and he was this happy-go-lucky little boy. And the hospital refused to admit that he had gotten this. I mean, they knew he had a major problem, but they refused to admit that it was the fault of the shot. They just says, oh, if it was the fault of the shot, it would have happened the day after the shot. This was Kaiser. They said it wouldn't happen 3 days later. And it's like, hello, he was fine, and everything was wonderful till that shot came about. Anyway, my daughter, she got online because she had heard that babies, sometimes if you were able to catch it early when they first got it, there was ways to help it. And she had found an article talking about giving major doses of vitamin E. So she started putting vitamin E into his milk. And it took about 6 months, and he started pulling out of it. And I wouldn't say he's completely well today, but he's a normal child. He's just maybe a little bit behind now.
And is your daughter now done with giving vaccinations?
Oh yeah.
To children?
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right, and so you as well, done.
Oh yes.
Okay, that's good to hear. Well, thank you for.
I have
telling
more
the story.
too.
Oh, you have more?
Oh, I have
go
more.
On, go ahead.
Number 2, I got the shingles. It was not a regular old shingles that you would get. It was, this again, I woke up. They always seem to hit me in the joints and bones. This time, this was about 2 months later. I woke up in the middle of the night, had to go to the bathroom. The second I got out of bed, it was right in my elbow. It hurt so bad. It's like a pain. It made having children less. It was so painful. And I go, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to live with this? And it was really weird. When I went back to bed, the pain went away. And next day, I had one sore on my chest. Over the next few days, my arm, I started getting itchy on my stomach and my back, but that's all that ever came to it. My arm started breaking out and sores all over, and it was hurting really bad, and it was itchy. I went to the doctor. He goes, it looks weird, but I said, I think you have the shingles. He goes, I'm not sure, but I think you do. He put me on some shingle medicine. It never really got into my back or my stomach, but my arm really, really affected. And even today, like all these years later, I still have a lot of pain in my arm and my wrist from and my elbow. It still hurts. Not super bad, but not it. I have spells, good days and bad days. And then the memory thing kicked in on us too. I didn't mention that. Both my husband and I, the memory thing kicked in. Shortly after we got our shots, the kids could really notice it because we worked together, and they, Mom, we have to ask questions and things now. We've got our brain, but it's gotten better over the years. But it's definitely there. And then my husband, this is the one that really concerns me, and I could start crying over this one because it still upsets me. Last Tuesday, we were at work. He comes back from lunch, and he's just looking really strange. And I go, something's wrong with him. And I go, are you okay? And he goes, yeah. And I mentioned something to him about a friend of ours, and he looks at me like I was weird, and he said, who's that? I go, what do you mean? Oh, I'm talking about Eric. And he goes, I don't know an Eric. I go, yes, you do, Eric and Amy. No, I don't know. And then it was like, well, he says, I'm having trouble remembering things. And I says, like what? And so we started asking him what year is this and all these things, and he couldn't answer us. And so we called the doctor. He says, call 911 right now and get him down to the hospital in an ambulance. So we did, because we thought he had a stroke. He was kind of dizzy, couldn't remember a lot of things, and he was scared, I could tell. And he was like, he says, I can't tell you, I feel weird. I just feel really weird. So we were all assuming he had a stroke. He was in the hospital for 3 days. They ran so many tests on him of everything. They said that it wasn't a stroke. There was no sign of a stroke, but it was so very definitely something had happened going on. They couldn't find anything at all. So after 3 days, he was well again. It was like nothing had ever happened to him. Then we found out from Renee that there's 23 other people she knew that the same thing has happened to him just recently. It seems to be the older people and the people who've had a COVID shot are the ones it's hitting. And then my daughter, Tammy, she was telling her friend about it who lives in LA, and she goes, oh my gosh, she goes, I know 3 people that's happened to. They were all the parents of her friends. So there's something going on. So that's what really makes it scary to us, because we know something's happening now to the older people, and we don't know what it is. And it's like, oh my gosh, is it going to hit us again? Or is it going to, we have no idea, because the medical world doesn't seem to know anything about it yet. And they probably wouldn't admit it anyway.
I must admit, we are hearing a lot about people who have stroke-like symptoms, yet when they get to hospital, they're told that it's not a stroke.
They thought it was a stroke until they ran an MRI.
That's what I'm saying.
And then they said it wasn't.
And then they said it wasn't. So
it wasn't
exactly
a stroke.
like
So something definitely going on. Poor balance, can't walk that good. Your mind, but it healed up in 3 days and whatever. And it's just kind of weird when it's starting to happen to a lot of people now, and they don't know what it is.
Is there anything else you want to say?
I think that's it.
Well, thank you for telling us. I'm sorry you got hurt, and I'm glad that you're not having any more.
Thank you.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.